Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this symposium on opportunities to expand nutrition at scale in the school feeding market. My name is Fabiola Dionisi, and I'm a senior expert in lipid sciences and lipid network leader at Nestle Research in Switzerland. Here is early afternoon and it's snowing. So I would like to start this symposium with a couple of reminders. First of all, the session will be closed with a panel discussion, and the question will be answered principally at that time. So please indicate your questions on the tool that has been given for that reason, and also indicate which speaker your question is for, so that I can read the question for the speakers. Otherwise, if it's not written the name of the speaker, I will read at the end of the session when we will have the panel discussion. So the first speaker is Dr. Peter Goldsmith. He's director of Soybean Innovation Lab. And a couple of words to introduce him. He holds a Ph.D. in agricultural economics and is currently professor at agribusiness management in the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics of the University of Illinois. He is also a fellow of the International Food and Agribusiness Management Association. And he is also one of the world's leading soybean economists with unique expertise in low-latitude soybean production and agro-industrial development. Also, Dr. Goldsmith serves as a director of the USAID Feed the Future Lab for soybean value chain research. And today, he will give a lecture on National School Lunch Nutrition and Cost Profile, a case study for soy fortification.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Pete Goldsmith, Director of the Soybean Innovation Lab, USAID Lab, and also a professor at the University of Illinois. Going to talk today, as Fabiola mentioned, about the fortification of national school lunch with soy. Some research we recently concluded. Before I do that, I wanted to give a quick overview of USAID's Feed the Future Lab for soybean value chain research. We're a $20 million enterprise based at the University of Illinois. We started mostly in Ghana, but now have expanded, have clients in 24 countries, mostly in Sub-Saharan Africa, also in Myanmar and Southeast Asia. USAID asked us, in terms of our mission, to help establish the foundation for soybean development in Sub-Saharan Africa. We are asked and cover the entire value chain from inputs all the way through to utilization. And we are a technology team. So we help those who are trying to develop soybean. And so when there are clients have requests, have bottlenecks, have challenges, we provide technical solutions. We are 44 US-based researchers as kind of the core, and then have dozens of partners around the world bringing technical solutions to the industry in Sub-Saharan Africa. We have 11 business units called Managed Research Areas. These are disciplinary units: breeding, seed, agronomy, feed utilization, and so forth. This is a map of our partners. Our technical partners span the globe as well. Today's talk, in the agenda, there are 3 learning objectives that we'd like to get across. The first is the cost to fortify an actual national school lunch with various soy and other protein ingredients. And you'll see this is a unique question working with an actual national school lunch presentation by caterers. The second objective is that listeners will learn about the actual meal and associate nutrient profile received by the students eating a school lunch. So what is the nutrition that actually goes in the mouth and is consumed? And third is the cost of the meal ingredients. So some economics about the school lunch, because not only does it have to be nutritional, but caterers have to be profitable so that they would continue to not only serve school lunch, but provide adequate nutrition to the students. So those are the learning objectives. The research project started with a fairly simple question: is soy fortification effective within a school lunch setting? And soy for nutrition has been around since the 1970s. This has been an area of strong interest to the global development and nutrition and food science communities. But to date, no research has answered this question. There have been some work that's looked at recipes and done some estimates based on recipes, but no work has actually worked with a school lunch presentation, the actual what caterers do. And you'll find out that caterers have a lot of discretion, which for dietitians and nutritionists, this is a big deal, because that discretion can really affect the nutrition that a student actually receives. And our clients, those we are working for to help in their decision-making, are organizations like WFP, National School Lunch Programs, the World Initiative for Soy and Human Health, USAID. Help them think about what to do with respect to protein fortification. If that's a objective they have, addressing low protein in the diet, this research helps them understand soy as a fortification mechanism. We had 7 research questions that we answer, and I'll present those today. And these are very functional questions, so very practical questions. So what is the level of school lunch nutrition? We'll answer that. What's the ingredient cost to the caterer for this school lunch that they're preparing? Are caterers serving the same food, nutrition, for the same recipe? And you'll see that it's highly variable. Are caterers sufficiently compensated? So are the economics right in the Ghana setting? Can soy have a role to play? Because there are local proteins, animal and fish product proteins, as well as local soy proteins. So there is protein available in northern Ghana where this study took place. And how should caterers employ soy when they fortify? Because soy comes in various forms: tofu, TSP, texturized soy protein, or soy flour. And is soy cheaper than more common forms of school lunch proteins? So we'll answer those. So here's a nutritional profile. This is a tomato stew, a very common dish served in northern Ghana. Caterers are very familiar with it. The caterers in our sample prepared it, and it provides about 32% of the protein needs for a 4 to 8-year-old, and about 19% of the protein needs for a 9 to 13-year-old. So depending on whether this is part of a diet throughout the day or if this is the only meal, has significant implications. So if it's the only meal, then 4 to 8-year-olds are getting about a third of their protein that they need from the recipe. And if they're a 9 to 13-year-old and this is their only meal, they're going to receive about 20% of the protein they need. So they're going to be significantly short on protein. So it is, the nutrition level is good for, or fair for 4 to 8-year-olds, but low for 9 to 13-year-olds. It's very high in salt, has adequate carbohydrates, and is low in protein. The second question that we answered was, what's the ingredient cost to the caterer? On average, it's about 62 Ghana cedi, and a cedi is about a 5 to 1, about 20 cents, a little bit less, and the range is wide, about 45%. So not only does the caterer have discretion with respect to the ingredients, but also they'll have differing costs because they'll procure the ingredients for the recipe. And the range is between 47 and 68 cedi. They get paid Pessoa. I apologize. I just made a mistake here. Let me backtrack. It's 62 Pessoa, which is 62% of a cedi. The range is 45%, and the range goes from 47 Pessoa to 68. So about half a cedi to about 2/3 of a cedi is the range in the cost. Sorry about my error there. So you can see here in the table, the cost per lunch averages about 62 Pessoa, about a third of a cedi. And again, a cedi is about 20 cents. Are the caterers serving the same ingredients for the same recipe? And the answer is no. Across the caterers, they'll serve 8 common ingredients. So all the meals have 8 ingredients, 8 of the same ingredients, but then there'll be 18 different ingredients. And this is hugely important for dietitians and nutritionists, this level of discretion. There is a recipe, of course, published by the Ghana School Feeding Program, but caterers may not have access to those ingredients on that day. They may be too expensive on that day. For whatever reason, the caterer has the discretion in how they prepare a tomato stew. So you can see here that the common ingredients are cooking oil, canned mackerel, Maggi cube, salt, rice, tinned tomatoes, onions, and pepper spice. But then some caterers will add in fresh tomato, anchovies, garlic. Some will offer tofu, cabbage, carrots, which of course affect the nutritional profile offered to the student. And one of the largest ingredients that's not on this list that is common to everyone is water. And the amount of water both affects the nutrition the student receives, as well as the economics, the returns that the caterer. Obviously, more water means lower nutrition and higher returns for the caterer, and less water means better nutrition and lower returns for the caterer. The fourth question we answered was, are caterers sufficiently compensated? The answer is yes. They have a gross margin of 38%. They also, that doesn't include their labor, their travel to deliver, and the meal, working capital. They need to have capital to procure the ingredients before they get paid. Ghana School Feeding pays after the meal would be served. And then the equipment, pans, cleaning equipment, transport equipment, and so on and so forth. But gross margin of 38%. And so that ranges from a gross margin of 32 cents to a high of 53. So there is a range in costs, but generally is a gross margin of 38% is favorable. And just in terms of a meal preparing for all the students, a caterer would net, in terms of gross margin, looking at, say, caterer 1, 132 seti on that particular meal on that particular day. And caterer 3 would net 40 seti on that particular meal on that particular day. Of course, it depends on how many students and so forth. Can soy have a role to play? And the answer is yes. So we looked at 3 products and replacing 10 grams of rice with 10 grams of soy. The soy flour, a maximum of 10%. And so the 10 grams was certainly within that tolerance because it'll start to affect the acceptance and the flavor and texture of the meal. Whereas texturized soy protein and tofu, you can flavor and add a significant portion, significant percentage, if depending on costs and so forth. But soy flour has a maximum ceiling of about 10% by volume. So yes, there are ingredients that can play a role in a school lunch, like a tomato stew. How might we cost effectively raise the protein in the recipe? The protein percent of soy flour is 38%, of TSP is 50%. Tofu is mostly water, so it's not that high in nutrition in terms of its mass, about 8% protein. The local products that are common are ground beef in northern Ghana at 17% protein, and mackerel, you saw that in the recipe, at 26%, the canned mackerel. So there are some ways to fortify via protein with various ingredients, and it's these 5 that we compared. So how should caterers employ soy when they fortify? It depends on caterers' objectives. If they're nutritional, then TSP provides the highest percentage of protein per unit of weight, followed by soy flour, followed by tofu. So depending on how much protein and the caterer would like to add, but there's also a cost factor because protein is expensive as opposed to starch or other ingredients. So cost is very, very essential in this problem. We compared the nutritional effects of adding soy to the tomato stew recipe. The green bars are when you add TSP, the red bars are when you add soy flour, and the purple bars are when you add tofu. So you can see that on protein, for example, you can increase protein over 50% by adding TSP, 10 grams of protein of TSP, about 50% by adding 10 grams of soy flour. So you can essentially go from 32% to say 48% of a 4 to 8-year-old's needs by adding TSP or soy flour. So significantly increasing the level of protein. And there are also different at the micronutrient level as well. There are differences among the three, which I won't go into because of time. Is soy cheaper than more common forms of school lunch proteins? For soy flour and TSP, the answer is yes. Soy flour is significantly cheaper than mackerel, less than a third the price of mackerel per unit of protein. And TSP is about 0.9 the cost of mackerel. In terms of tofu, it is much more expensive per unit of protein because it's mostly water. So it's about 4 times the cost of local protein. So for protein fortification, TSP and soy flour would be more effective, and soy flour is the significantly the most effective way to fortify, to elevate protein levels in a school lunch. So when we look at the comparative cost of protein, this is the cost per gram of protein. That soy flour is about 0.13 SETI, 0.13 SETI for soy flour. More than double is the price of TSP. Tofu, because it's a fabulous product, it has great mouthfeel, delicious, and so forth, but is more expensive per unit of protein because of its high water content. And then ground beef and mackerel are about the same, a little bit more expensive than TSP. So conclusions and challenges: soy is a cost-effective protein fortification strategy. So that's, we've shown that in the research, especially soy flour. It is locally available. It's very common in many countries across Africa. It is not a relatively difficult product to produce. It is, and it can be produced where it's shelf stable as well. And it's competitive against traditional proteins like mackerel or ground beef. The challenge is the adoption of protein fortification by the school lunch programs. So there are questions about distribution, availability, procurement. In lots of markets, soy flour is readily available, but other markets it's not. And it has to be easy for caterers to acquire, to procure the soy flour and on a regular basis, and store it so that they can use it as they produce school lunches throughout the week, throughout the month. Whether it's tofu, TSP, or soy flour, as long as soy flour is below the 10% threshold, acceptance is not a barrier. The students in the work we did found acceptance, the meal highly acceptable. There was no change in mouthfeel, flavor in the tomato stew when fortified. So adapting the recipes is not the barrier, and acceptance is not the barrier. It's really an internal policy question, as well as a access to the supply chain. In a lot of cases, soy flour is available. We certainly found that in northern Ghana, that it was available. There are manufacturers providing it. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Peter, for this very interesting talk. Actually, we have a few questions from the audience. The first question is, what was the amount of soya per child, and what was the rise in protein?
Yeah, so it was 10 grams. So the change that we looked at was substituting 10 grams of rice, because before the protein fortification, the dominant source or of protein for the tomato stew came from rice, even though it's very low in protein. There was such a large quantity of rice. So we substituted out 10 grams of rice for 10 grams of protein.
Okay.
Of soy, sorry, 10 grams of soy.
Thank you very much. So I'm asking another question very much related to details of the presentation. Why was flour chosen over TSP if TSP has more protein?
Yeah, so the key, and I could backtrack on the slides, it's really it's about cost per unit of protein. The TSP is a better product in a sense, because it not only is shelf stable like soy flour, but it has very good consumption properties, high acceptance. TSP is a fabulous product. The problem is that it's more than twice as expensive per unit of protein. So if the National School Lunch Program, their objective is to elevate protein from, say, 19% of the needs of a 9 to 13-year-old, say, to 25% or 30%, then soy flour is a much more cost-effective way. If cost is not so much of an issue, then TSP comes in. TSP is still cheaper in the Northern Ghanaian context than the local traditional proteins like mackerel and ground beef, but it is more than twice as expensive as soy flour. Soy flour is very efficient at delivering protein, if that's your objective.
Okay, and then maybe last question, which is very much related, very simple. Are the prices for soy flour and TSP wholesale or markets?
Yeah, so the caterers do buy in the market. Now, whether they're able to negotiate, that's beyond our scope, but that's a great question. This was not right as the caterers' normal practices. It is their task, their obligation to go into the market, procure the ingredients, and prepare the ingredients for the students. There is not a warehouse where the National School Lunch Program is procuring at wholesale and bringing them in, but I'm sure there maybe are programs out there that do that, but in this particular case, it is essentially retail.
Okay, thank you very much. There are other questions, but we will leave it for the debate at the end. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So it's a great pleasure now to give the floor to Juan Andrade, who is Associate Professor of Global Food and Nutrition at the University of Florida. He holds a BSc in Agricultural Sciences from Zamorano University, Honduras, and a Ph.D. in Human Nutrition from Purdue University. Dr. Andrade Is an affiliate faculty of the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition, the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences and Food System Institute, and the Center of Latin America Studies and the Center of African Studies. Is also research affiliate at the USAID Livestock Innovation Lab. And he is a principal investigator of the human nutrition team at the USDA Soybean Innovation Lab. So he will give a lecture on school lunch programs, opportunities for soy nutrition. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction. And I just want to say again, thank you to the AOCS and the IFT, IITA, and all the folks that have been allow us to bring this information, this science to as many as people as possible in Sub-Saharan Africa. It's something that we started several months ago, and I'm so quite happy that it's happening now. So the title of my presentation is about the school lunch programs and opportunities for soy nutrition. I think you heard from Dr. Goldsmith that soy might play a role in as a cost-effective alternative to bring good nutrition, adequate nutrition to children in Sub-Saharan Africa. So the first things I want to make here, there's three messages. This one that adequate nutrition is key throughout the life cycle. And that we have this conversation that we focus on the first 1,000 days, but really we should focus on the whole life cycle of the individual. And when we have more increased needs early on and continuing to school age, soy foods are a great complement for nutrition, growth and development. And it's something that through this presentation, I hope I convince you that that's the case. And then I'll show you a little bit of what is our best bet through our paradigm, which is called DINES, for the school nutrition, and what we believe it could be transformative in Sub-Saharan Africa. So in a nutshell, these are the world nutrition statistics, if you want to put it, dice it 4 ways. The world is divided in those who are hungry and have hidden hunger. That's micronutrient deficiencies. It's about 0.9 billion people. And we have another group that might have access to calories, but probably still deficient in some micronutrients such as iron, zinc, vitamin A, and iodine. And nowadays, vitamin D, for example. That's what we call hidden hunger. So 2 billion people. And then we have about 3 billion people that we call ourselves to some degree healthy, because we have good access to safe foods that are nutritious, provides enough calories and enough micronutrients. But then very quickly, we also have now 1.4 billion people that have issues with overconsumption of these good nutrients to the point that they start developing overnutrition and obesity and overweight, and which is associated with many chronic diseases, such as we're learning. So when you look at these statistics, it's very clear that it's a lot of more work needs to be done. And the argument today is that maybe the school lunch programs are the place, centralized place, to bring these better behaviors for adequate nutrition. So we can address hunger, that we can address micronutrient deficiencies, and also we can address these behaviors of these individuals that move out of schools and continue consuming these high caloric, low nutrient dense diets. The next statistic I want to remind you is that besides the fact that we have COVID around us, we still have 144 million children that are stunted. That's about 21.3% of all the children under 5. So this stunting is what we call children that have low height for age. That's how we define chronic undernutrition. Importantly, stunting is associated with early child deaths. And if it continues into school age, it impairs performance and cognitive development. If undernutrition continues then into adulthood, it manifests into lower economic productivity as the individual cannot access higher paying jobs. So addressing stunting early is one of the key strategies that has been put forward by the World Health Assembly. It's actually goal number 1, to deal with stunting in as much as we can as a world. So addressing stunting, especially among girls as they move into schools, I will present some data that maybe persuade us to think about differently about nutrition in the schools in Sub-Saharan Africa. In this world map, I just want to point out that our work is more relevant today than it was ever been before. We still have these pockets of stunting and malnutrition throughout the world, but especially in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And in this map, it comes from the joint child nutrition estimates from UNICEF, WHO, and the World Bank. And it's just want to point out where the focus of our work should be. Necessarily not saying that we should stop thinking about Latin America or stop thinking about other regions of the world. I'm saying that where the problem it's significant, where you have significant rates of stunting, is in those 2 regions. So why the argument about focusing on school feeding programs and why this is critical for development? So you know that growth continues after the first 1,000 days, right? So probably until the next 5,000 days. You keep growing until you are 16 if you're a girl, and a little bit later for boys. And school feeding during this time can bring together the ability, right, to for adequate nutrition for these children at a central and safe place. And then they also can learn skills and behaviors supportive of adequate nutrition, hygiene, and health later on in life. And this is not new. We understand this. We have looked at different programs. There are many programs, including the United States, that are focused on school lunch programs and breakfast programs as well, to the point that we debate if they are good, or we debate if they're optimal, or we debate that the funds should go different places. I'm just saying that the funds should go to school nutrition, but then you have to optimize how you can deliver these nutrients in the best ways without jeopardizing programmatic needs. And that is the problem. That is the question, how we can do better at that. So health and nutrition school programs are not new, as I mentioned before. Schools are a cost-effective platform for providing simple, safe, and effective health interventions to school-age children and adolescents. So, and probably most of you remember somebody coming from the public health office to talk about dental hygiene. I still remember the songs that used to be played when this big bunny came with Colgate to talk about how you have to wash your teeth. I still remember how the song goes. So it's something that it stays with you for a long time, but it has to be masterfully put together. So in some way, this influence is with you, and then you continue to the next generation. So think importantly, these school programs allow us for this influence in behavior. And for the great majority of times, these programs have been focused on health, addressing quick hunger, not necessarily to bring good nutrition to children, but mostly to reduce attrition so the children can come to school, because the meal is more like a benefit to the child to come. And remember that at the schools, having all the resources available, the good teachers, good books, it's not enough. You have to have good nutrition so you can make the best of it. Remember that also good nutrition, it can reduce illnesses. And ill health can be the catalyst for extended absence or dropping out for schools completely. Malaria and worm infections can reduce enrollment. Anemia can affect cognition, attention span, and learning. And the pain associated with tooth decay can affect both attendance and learning. So what you see in these school programs, the typical interventions, and probably, again, most of you that if you were coming from a lower income country, you realize that probably you receive a deworming pill to deal with worms. talk about bed nets and malaria, hand washing and bacterial infections, how you have to wash your hands, tooth brushing and dental caries, as I mentioned before, talking about eye health, and then providing micronutrient powders and addressing micronutrient deficiencies, and of course, addressing these hunger as much as you can. The figure I'm showing here, it's from this citation, and in which it's data for Sub-Saharan Africa, and see in the last couple of decades, the number of proportion of countries that have established school programs or programs that have to do with delivery through schools has increased in many countries. So again, this is nothing new. It's centralized. It can be easily strategized how to better bring, at least in the case of nutrition, adequate nutrition to the meals of programs. The last thing I want to say is that schools are also a place to learn. And you probably remember when you brought your kids, you took your kids to school, you remember that it's a family, right? It's a good time that you remember, have good memories of your school years, probably early on when your children are young. But it's a good place to link the teachers, the principals with the parents. So these behaviors not just stay with the children, but actually can be moved into homes and from homes back to the school, and they can be reinforced there, right, with the teachers. So it's something that it seems to me that there's a more adequate place to bring these influential strategies for good nutrition. Another aspect is focusing on school programs is this potential for future impacts on food choices. And food choices, you know this very well, they start early in life and can be accentuated or modified during school years. To this day, I don't like lobster because my dad didn't like lobster. It's just as simple as that. We never had lobster at home. And that's because it was expensive. I live in Guayaquil, Ecuador. We have access to lobster at lower cost. It's just he didn't like it. So if I'm not exposed to the food early on in life, I won't probably develop a good taste for it and appreciate that food as much as I appreciate others. So food choices start early in life. So if we design programs in which these food choices can be influenced to be more supportive of a good health, could be something that will expand the potential of this good nutrition beyond the school. And you realize that food choices, there are many factors that determine food choice, many determinants, including cost and flavor and variety and well-being and convenience and also culture and personal beliefs. But by far, our food choices, at least in Sub-Saharan Africa, depend mostly on cost and flavor. Nutrition is pretty much an afterthought. It's actually a benefit if the food is nutritious. The argument is that it's going to fill your belly and you're happy through this process of consuming this food because it's delicious and it's at a lower cost. So the trifecta here is how we can make those school lunch programs, how we can take those three determinants, make it delicious food, make it low cost, and make it nutritious. So it's nutrition at a cost on a budget. So let me tell you something else about another data. This is from the World Bank. And this was published by the World Bank. This is Leslie Drake's group. And I just want to show you on the left. This is what we call the source book for the school programs. And they did a review of 14 countries, a case study, 14 countries around the world, and obtained data on how they operate their school lunch programs to understand what lessons learned, what works, right? These countries were Botswana, Brazil, Cape Verde, Chile, Cote d'Ivoire, Ecuador, Ghana, India, Kenya, Mali, Mexico, Namibia, Nigeria, and South Africa. So very well represented Latin American countries as well as Sub-Saharan African countries. So let's see the graph on the left. The blue bar shows you the actual amount of food provided. That's what Dr. Goldsmith was talking about. How much food you get. And it matters because the more food you give, not necessarily it's more expensive. It's just that maybe you can give a little bit more or less, and you can address the needs of more children with the same amount of food if you balance the meal correctly. But if you can see in this graph, it's about 225 grams. So on average, but it varies a lot, about 40%. This amount of food can be a hot meal, including many ingredients, any animal or plant-based ingredients, or as simple as cereal porridge. The orange part shows you the calories of these grams of foods. On average, it delivers these 14 programs about 30% of the energy requirements for the school children based on the 9 to 13 years of age, using arguing that these are moderately active children. The table on the right provides the range calorie needs values for these children to make these calculations. So the range of energy is about 17 to 41% calories. And importantly is that, as Professor Goldsmith was talking about, if the child is small, we'll eat less, and the child is older, we'll eat more. But that means differential cost and differential nutrition too. And it has to be like that, because a child that is 14 to 18 years of age have higher nutritional needs. Finally, the green bar shows the energy density of calories per 100 gram. And you might ask, what is this? Well, when the calorie density increases, it might indicate the presence of mostly starches and oils as source of energy. Such it was the case for these 14 countries, as I'm going to show you in the next slide. So here on the graph on the left, is very self-explanatory. I want to show you the potential of better nutrition in schools, as was mentioned before, and it's just about micronutrients. Importantly, the report only included protein, fats, energy, and iron and vitamin A. However, we have nutrition food composition database in all these countries, so it could have been easily to find all the other micronutrients present to be able to do the calculations, understand what are the gaps. So maybe the school lunch programs can address. And my point of view is that you can address micronutrient gaps faster because the amounts are lesser than addressing protein, for example, gaps, because it will require more bulk food for the children to eat. So the meal programs provide a large amount of carbohydrates compared to fats and proteins. And this is not new. We knew that. Mostly these are the cereal staples, such as sorghum, such as maize, and this is not necessarily negative, right? But assuming average weights, these meals provide at least 25% of the RDA for protein for younger children. So if you're a young child, maybe you can get some good protein, a good amount of protein for your quota per day, but it's still quite low for children. You can see the two bars for 4 to 6 years and 14 to 18 years of the RDA for protein. The graph on the right shows you the average contribution to energy from these micronutrient sources. So these protein sources for these programs was both animal and plant-based sources. However, the trick is, again, how to balance cost, flavor, and nutrition to solve this equation. So, and it's something that we argue, as Dr. Goldsmith mentioned in his presentation, maybe soy can bring some of that good nutrition at a cost and without jeopardizing flavor, because that's key. And we heard that yesterday by Dr. Gotra. Flavor trumps nutrition many times over. And we believe that because we have seen it happening. Most of you probably have eaten French fries or a burger, and then you're looking at broccoli or some other vegetables, and you look twice before you grab it. And that's just life. That's just human nature. And it's hard to go against it, but we can design foods that beat that. And it's something that at the Soybean Innovation Lab, we are proud to work on. The goal of our nutrition team at the Soybean Innovation Lab is to address food insecurity and malnutrition through more effective, safer, nutritious soy-enhanced foods. And we say soy-enhanced foods because we want to argue that you can use soybeans to make many different types of foods beyond soy milk and tofu. Because probably these foods, although are nutritious and though are delicious, might bring lesser nutrients because they're diluted, right? You have to use water and you have other processings to dilute some of the nutrients. And that's why soy flour seems to be adequate, at least at 10 grams or 20 grams of incorporation into a meal. Our team uses an evidence-based participatory approach to research nutrition for development, which is guided by a DINES paradigm, which stands for delicious, inexpensive, nutritious, environmentally, culturally acceptable, and safe. That's our paradigm. If foods are DINES, more likely we can tackle this complex design of bringing good nutrition to schools. Our team has 3 main objectives, all of which address technical gaps within country partners, as well as building capacity of practitioners. And these are alleviate early child malnutrition through soy-enhanced DINES, complementary foods focusing on early child nutrition. We focus on school nutrition through soy-enhanced DINE foods for feeding programs, institutional programs, and also through this symposium, for example, we're trying to bridge this gap of knowledge that exists into bringing these good nutritious foods through soy through these institutional programs, for example, as markets that could be profitable to those processors in Sub-Saharan Africa. So, and just to tell you very quickly about the soybeans, the mighty soybean is about in 100 grams uncooked raw soybeans. It's about 440 kilocalories or 4.4 kilocalories per gram. It's very nutrient and calorie dense. A large proportion of this is oil and protein is used and sold around the world for oil. And the protein is used to feed humans and animals. 100 grams of soybeans provide 100% of the recommended dietary allowance, for example, for children 3 to 4 years of vitamin K, B1, B2, and folic acid. Also provides 100% of requirements for magnesium and phosphorus. So it's a very nutritious legume. And this nutritious legume has about 36 to 38% protein. If you compare that 36, 38% protein with other legumes available and commercially available, as I'm showing you in this graph, and about grams per 100 grams of product, only lupin beans are closer to soybeans in terms of the profile of high protein. However, other proteins such as peanuts are also a good source of protein, also a good source of fats, which are also needed for children growth. You need energy, right? So the carbohydrate content of most legumes is high in digestible starch, and soybeans tend to have less starch and more dietary fiber and soluble fiber. This graph shows you or argue the quality of soy protein compared to other sources of protein, animal and plant-based. And this is using the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. It's a method to evaluating quality of a protein base on both amino acid requirements of humans and their ability to digest these foods. So the value of PDCAS can be 1 or more. By convention, we use only the value of 1. And the protein from soybeans and extracted soy proteins is actually quite closer to egg and dairy. So soy protein is good quality protein. Also, soy has other components such as oligosaccharides. And these fiber, this soluble fiber that could be fermented, can be intentionally used, right, to promote the growth of good bacteria and potentially improve the gut resilience in children, which is a big problem in Sub-Saharan Africa. This is something that right now the Gates Foundation is funding programs like that to ferment plant proteins and understand how that release more nutrients and also improve gut health. For the most part, the hulls or the coats of soybeans are discarded. They're no use. And maybe this is an upcycle ingredient that can be used for this specific purpose in Sub-Saharan Africa. This is my last slides, and that's just to make the point. It has to be cost effective. We can sneak in soy in so many different ways, but it has to be cost effective. Otherwise, we just won't be able to bring it home. In the left graph, in the left figure, I'm plotting the cost of providing 100% of the RDA for protein for children 4 to 9 years of age in orange and 9 to 13 years of age in blue. And this is for Ghana. As you can see, it's more expensive to address all the dietary protein needs per day using milk, eggs, or beef. And also, I have anything against milk, eggs, or beef. It's just it's more expensive. And my argument is not remove it. My argument is to complement how we can complement these protein sources at a cost. It's cost effective. We might stretch the dollar more if we add more soy without jeopardizing quality, without jeopardizing nutrient content, and in some ways addressing the needs of more children, such as in the case I'm showing you in the graph on the right. And the graph on the right have different sources of proteins, similar to the colors of bars, so children 4 to 9 and children 9 to 13. And I'm showing with $1, you can provide 20% of the protein needs. As I mentioned before, the average of those 14 case studies from the World Bank project was 20% protein. So, 13% of the requirement of protein. So what if you want to up these 7% to 20% protein? So you can feed more children with soybeans with the same dollar that you will do with cowpeas, groundnuts, and of course TVP, because the TSP is expensive as well. And the other animal source is sources of protein. So as I mentioned to you also, I didn't probably bring this up, that the cost that of these programs, these 14 programs published by Leslie Drakes, it was about between 25 to 300 US per year per child. Okay, and that's the problem in Chile. It's actually quite expensive. It's $300 per children, but the least expensive program is about 25 US per child per year. So and thinking that the great majority of programs will probably only provide about $50 or less per child per year to cover the needs of a school nutrition, then cost has to matter. It has to be front and center, and I think soybeans can deal with that, can address that. Finally, I want to say thank you to the team, the two first folks here, soon to be doctors actually, Ms. Edge Gulkerpik, Marco Talk. Dr. Ashley Dominguez is not with us anymore, but she's moving for greener pastures. Annette Donnelly and Jeanette Andrade, they're very supportive, and Annette's being instrumental to get this symposium going. Probably have received a lot of emails from her. With that, and thank you for your time, and I'm ready for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan, for this great talk. From the audience, there are a couple of interesting questions. I will start with the first one. So at what level are you suggesting a nutrition education intervention? At national, district, what is the level?
I think most of the programs that are successful based on the source book for the school programs have a centralized, a national program where there is a specific policies and laws supporting the program that don't have to depend on a new government to come and continue a resolution, for example, that this program is successful. So the nutrition education has to be at the same level. So the benefits can be reached to all these children attending school lunch programs. However, those are public programs, right? And arguing that the children that attend the private schools probably have more funds to bring their own lunch, for example. But one of the largest programs, central managed and is still successful, is the Indian one, 133 million children, right? So it's a significant size program, but it's managed to the point that it's very limited funds given to those children, but the nutrition education is part of it, and it has to be front and center as well. And similar to the comment I make about Colgate coming to the classroom and teach you how to wash your teeth, that should be present, and you have to be better at doing that for children.
Thank you. So there is another question. What about the CSB?
Corn soy blend. Corn soy blend is a mix of corn, grits, and meal with about defatted soy flour. And it has a little bit of oil and some micronutrients. And nowadays it contains some milk protein, because we got smart about it, put some milk protein in there and put some micronutrients and chelated iron. It's a good corn soy blend. It's good in some cases, has led to significant support of nutritional needs of children in different countries. Is it the best product we can come up with? Absolutely not. We can do better than corn soy blend. It's something that food scientists can just look at what you need and can put something great together. So my thought is, let's get nutritionists and food scientists together and some marketing experts, and we can solve this problem easily enough. And I'm saying that corn soy blend is bad, saying that it serves its purpose, but we can do better.
Yeah. And finally, I have one question. It's from me. You have talked a lot about proteins and micronutrients. What about fat? So healthful fat, good fat. And actually in soybean, we have also some omega-3, alpha-linolenic acid. So what is your consideration about that?
One of the things that we don't know much about soy is the lecithin phospholipid content. And lecithin and choline, phosphatidylcholine, which is lecithin, from soybeans is quite bioavailable, quite useful, and children need this. It's a semi-essential nutrient, so and especially semi-essential when children are growing. So bringing this good fat is important. Omega-3s and omega-6s to the point that now we're recommending that in the rations of the foods. So that's the argument that we have, is why we should split the soybean in so many different ways that we take out the oil. The oil has the best part of things: vitamin E, vitamin K, the phosphatidylcholine, and the fatty acids that are important for growth. And that has been our argument. Maybe soy flour could fit that, do the trick here. Not necessarily just soy flour, but we're thinking that if you split the grain more, there will be less nutrition. I understand that there are purposes for that, functional reasons for making foods different, taste different, look different, smell different. But here, soy flour seems to be very nutritious already.
I agree. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting discussion, and we will continue the discussion during the panel. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It is an honor to be here with all of these other wonderful speakers. And I am going to take some time today to talk to you about lessons learned by processors, resilience, and pivoting for protein in child nutrition. I am Liz Hare. I'm the Executive Director of the WISHH program, the World Initiative for Soy in Human Health at the American Soybean Association. And I just want to go over today what I'm going to talk about. The first is I'm just going to take some time to introduce you to WISHH and what our organization is and what we do. And then our 3 learning objectives are lessons that we have learned from some of our partners that we'd like to share with you here today that we thought were valuable for this symposium. The first is, how can production for school meals become commercially viable for African companies? The second is, how can adaptive management improve the food supply chain and ultimately improve school meals? And the third is, what can be learned through global mentorship to improve production for school meals? And the way that I'm going to share these lessons with you today is largely by introducing 2 of our strategic partners that are active on the continent. One is based in Uganda, the other is based in Ghana. So we're going to have some short videos throughout the presentation to come a bit later. But first, who is WISHH and what do we do? So our mission is to improve agricultural value chains in emerging markets to create trade and long-term demand for U.S. soy. We were founded 20 years ago by U.S. soybean farmers who knew that protein was key to human nutrition. And we work with nonprofit organizations, governments and non-governmental organizations, local business leaders, and academic institutions to improve full market systems with the goal of ultimately improving food security. Again, we only work in emerging and developing markets, so we are active in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Africa is the African continent is where a significant portion of our work happens. And the reason for that is because of statistics that you all are very well aware of. But the first, that Africa's population could reach 2 billion by 2030, and the projected statistic that 50% of the population could be under the age of 18 by 2050, which means that there are obviously a significant amount of school children that are going to need meals between now and then. Our first learning objective is how can production for school meals become commercially viable for African companies? And the challenges are also challenges that you all are very well aware of and that have already been addressed mostly by the speakers here this morning. But the first is that school feeding programs are generally underfunded, or there's not a significant amount of money to spend on school meals. And the second is that companies must be able to meet the mandates of school feeding programs. So they must be able to deliver quality meals and be able to do it profitably. So those are two of the main challenges that we have seen the companies that we work with work to address. And some of the opportunities that we have seen to overcome those challenges are that local procurement of ingredients allows for higher margins. The second is that value-added imports or imports that are value-added locally can create opportunities to deliver a higher price per gram of protein for the companies that are producing them. And the third is that a greater retail strategy that makes the important food processing infrastructure viable commercially. And what that means is just that the companies are not only working to deliver products to school meals or to government school meals program, they also have a greater retail strategy that has their products getting into local supermarkets or other commercial means. This is one of our strategic partners. This is Mr. Charles Nsubuga, who is the CEO of Sisako Limited in Uganda. Charles is one of our key partners. And I'd like to take the time here to show you a quick video of Charles and his company to give you an example of the type of diversified production that we're talking about in this first learning objective. So if we could go ahead and roll that video.
Sisako is the supply chain partner for the US soy value-added products. We can't produce them at home, so we better import them from USA to our country to address two main challenges, one nutrition and then the other one the economic challenge. Sisako has been working with WISHH in many angles. First of all, taking in the technical consultants from WISHH to Uganda. Then we train them on how to use the product and also bring in trade teams from Uganda to USA, where they were exposed to new ideas of how to use soybeans into their bakery products. The collaboration promoted trade between us, because even the neighboring countries are now picking the idea, because of what is existing between us and WISHH and ASA. The economic impact is such a big one, it could have not taken place without this kind of partnership.
Okay, so as you saw in that video, Sisako is a really great example of how production for school meals can become commercially viable. And two of the main things that you saw there were Sisako's diversified production. They produce a variety of soy-based products that are for sale on the commercial market and are also used by school meals programs. But they are also they invest significantly in community outreach. So just like Dr. Andrade was speaking of a moment ago, this company invests significantly in the training of school cooks, and not only how to use their products, but they do a lot of taste testings. They do a lot of nutrition education. So they're teaching the cooks, one, how to utilize the products in the school meals programs, how they can get the best taste from them, how they can get the kids the most interested in them. But then they also do a significant amount of outreach on nutrition education as well, so that the cooks understand what they're preparing in these types of school meals programs. The second learning objective is how can adaptive management improve the food supply chain and ultimately improve school meals? And one of the things that we have seen the most across all of the successful partners that we work with is this idea of a startup mindset. What we have seen is the people that are running these companies that have seen success are extremely innovative. They are driven leaders, and they invest time and effort in networking, not just with the business community and the nonprofit community in their countries, but also with government and government representatives. And they also respond extremely quickly to problems and adjust their processes and their businesses accordingly, and are willing to make changes quickly, even if it was a change they were not anticipating. Again, you see here, Charles, just an example of some of the changes this company, Societé, has made in Uganda. We'll use COVID as an example. Post-COVID, there were restrictions in Uganda about what type of vehicles were allowed on the roads at certain times. So the company had to adjust their distribution strategy. So instead of delivering in trucks, they needed to transition to deliver via motorbike, which meant that they also had to adjust their packaging to be sure that the products that they were delivering via motorbike could survive that route of delivery, that mode of distribution. So those are just two examples of some very quick adaptive management that company underwent post-COVID. Here is another one of our strategic partners. This is Mr. Samuel Intim, who's the CEO of Yident Agro Industries in Ghana. Yident was just awarded First Agro Processor of the Year in Ghana. And Yident is another example of a great company that has been able to adaptively manage some significant challenges in Ghana, COVID and otherwise. So we have another short video to share with you about some of the strides that Yident has made in Ghana. If we could roll that video.
COVID has taught us a lot of lessons. Formerly, about 98-99% of all our sales are in institutional sales. But we've realized that with COVID, we have to get more to the consumer. The vision of Yident is to become a premier food fortificant company, and our brands eating in at least 1 out of every 4 homes in Ghana and beyond. We've had a couple of challenges that has really been ameliorated or resolved through partnership and stakeholder collaborations. One that is current and that stands out is our supply chain partnerships with WISHH. In 2016, after the consummation of the partnership, 5 things has really emerged that has really helped our business up to date. First, trade promotion. 2, technical assistance. 3, training. 4, research, knowledge advancement, and giving us world platform through the World Food Prize and all to be able to communicate what can be done from this part of the world. We want to continue this partnership, this supply chain partnership, to get more products developed, to get enhanced trade between us and the US. So the WISHH ASA partnership has been excellent in helping us develop products, get the products to the market, supporting us in a number of ways, establishing our laboratories, and also helping us be there to be able to support the poultry industry in this country. For the first time in this country, through our collaboration with WISHH, you have the promotion of soy, flour, fortified bread. Through this collaboration, there was some training that was given to Societé.
We have a big problem, which is protein deficiency, but we have an even bigger problem, which is no money to afford the protein. So the question comes, how do you come about with sources of protein that individuals can afford in the country or on the continent at large? And it comes to plant source protein. Soybean comes in to say, yes, I'm plant-based, but I'm also giving you a complete protein.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is sponsoring the Obasima logo in Ghana. And what is the Obasima logo? The Obasima logo is a logo that are licensed to companies on their products to indicate that those products contain some 18 minerals and vitamins that is good for human health and help build the immunity of consumers.
I see the promise in the food industry at large in Ghana. I really see great promise for Yidens because the farmers are bringing good quality products to us. Using our agro-processing knowledge and the demand for processed foods, we are getting some market.
Okay, so that again was Mr. Samuel Intim from Yeadon Agro Industries, in Ghana. If you would like to learn more about what Yeadon did post-COVID, you can see more of that documentary on WISHH's website at wishh.org. One of the things that I wanted to highlight that Yeadon has worked in terms of adaptive management is that company saw an opportunity to expand into poultry feed production. So that company now also produces poultry feed, and they saw that as a way to keep their human nutrition business essentially afloat or in production, in business. They saw an opportunity to expand beyond what they were currently doing in human foods to work in poultry feed and also be able to continue bringing in a profit on their human foods line through that product expansion. So that's another great example of the adaptive management that we were talking about earlier. And then the third learning objective is what can be learned through global mentorships to improve production for school meals. WISHH hosted a USDA Cochrane Fellowship Program in 2018 when we brought together about 60 public and private participants from 13 countries across Africa and the Americas. And what we saw was an incredible exchange of ideas globally that ended up impacting the continent of Africa and Central America, just from the lessons learned between the participants that were involved there. And the training topics included school nutrition, the role of private sector investment, and protein inclusion and US farm and some corporate visits in the United States. But what we really saw happen was this cross-cultural exchange of ideas and new product innovations and ideas that were taken from one country to another, and then also government and private sector collaboration for school feeding programs. We had participants there from the private sector, but we also had participants from government, and they were able to network together and build relationships during that program and all get the training together on why soy is valuable for school nutrition, what are the economics of it. We're able to learn that all together, and then we're able to go back to their home countries and work on initiatives to bring that to fruition. This was the title of that conference. And then here again, you see Charles from Sisako. He is together here with one of his partners, his NGO partners from BRAC, that the company produces school meals for this NGO partner. So that's another example of the networking that was brought up earlier. And then this is Sisako taking the lessons learned at that conference in the US on school meals back to Uganda. You can see here they're working with soy. They're teaching school cooks how to utilize the product, but they're also talking about the nutrition involved in the production. And here you see the school children receiving some of the school meals. And then this is Soteria, who you saw in the video about Yident. She is holding a bag of protemas, which is actually a textured soy product that's produced in Guatemala. Yident was introduced to that product by Alimentos, the company that produces protemas in Guatemala, and took that idea back to Ghana and worked to develop a similar product in Ghana, and then worked together with some representatives that had been at that conference as well from the Ghana School Meals Program to bring lessons learned on how to actually utilize TSP in school meals to the Ghana School Meals Program back in Ghana. So that's a really great example of the global mentorships that we have seen be of significant value for some of our partners. And that is all that I have for you today, and I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
So Liz, thanks a lot for this inspiring talk. There is a question for you. What percentage of Sisako's soya input are local?
Of Sisako's, I think the vast majority currently are local production. One of the things that I didn't mention at the beginning of this is, WISH's goal is not to displace local production. What we have seen in Ghana, for example, is that the local production does not meet existing demand. We have seen that in the feed industry, especially, that the amount of soy available in country is not enough to meet current demand, and so won't be enough to meet growing demand unless things improve significantly here in the next few years. And so our goal is not to displace local production, it's to help improve the supply chain, to fill supply chain gaps where they exist so that human food processors and feed processors have the raw materials that they need.
Thank you very much. So I have then a question. What are you doing for gender equality, so equal opportunities?
So we have seen some of the companies that we work with try to increase female employment at their companies through different means. One of the things that we have done, not in Africa, but in other locations, is a specific training of cooks and also some female small business programs. And so a lot of what we do in Africa is driven by the companies that we work with. And so we have seen some of the companies invest in that. But a lot of what we have done also from our direct involvement has been in other places around the globe.
Thank you. And there is another question from the audience. How much of Sisako's soy is from Ugandan farmers?
So I think that may be the same question as the other. Sisako's, I believe the vast majority of the soy that they are currently using is from Ugandan farmers.
Okay. Thanks a lot, then.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we pass now to the other speakers, the last speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So welcome to the last talk of the day, and then we will have a panel discussion. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Bimbola Adesanmi. Bimbola is a food security and nutrition specialist with over 15 years of experience in nutrition, food security, school and public health nutrition programming. She holds a postgraduate degrees in public health and nutrition. She's a senior specialist assistant to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on the homegrown school feeding program. She's leading this program, and she will give a talk on current and potential use of soybean in homegrown school feeding program in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here on the Agro-Processors Symposium. And as Fabiola had introduced my topic with Busie Maziya-Dixon of IITA, will be on the current and potential use of soybean in homegrown school feeding program in Sub-Saharan Africa. My slides will run through the introduction, the concept of the homegrown school feeding program, the nutrient standards that the program uses and how they are formulated and met, soybean and its contribution in meeting these nutrient targets that have been set, Nigeria as a case example, and I'll try and wrap up with the conclusion. In Sub-Saharan Africa, school feeding programs has been a strategy for poverty reduction. It's used as a safety net program to concentrate providing benefits to the neediest in the society. It's also used as a strategy to improve learning and educational outcomes because they can benefit educational indicators in enrollment, attendance, cognition, and educational achievement. In terms of health and nutrition, the program has been designed to reduce hidden hunger and improve micronutrient and macronutrient deficiencies. The program also has within that strategy to improve income generation by boosting incomes of the poorest households, thereby helping to alleviate poverty and relieving parents of having to budget for school lunches for their children. Adding value is also one of the key strategies that the program has been designed to achieve in terms of helping to create a structured demand market for farm produce, and thereby adding initiatives such as enabling local suppliers, local agriculture, women empowerment, skills development, community engagements, and so much more. In 2003, the African leaders through the African Union and the new Partnerships for African Development, NEPAD, agreed that education, health, and nutrition of young children and leaders of tomorrow had to be centerpiece for achieving the SY Millennium Development Goals and other targets. They committed to locally sourced school feeding programs in the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, CADIP. In the same year, the new Partnership of Africa Development, now known as AUDA, which is African Union Development Agency, adopted the locally sourced school feeding programs as a key intervention to address hunger and malnutrition by African governments. Under this program, NEPAD teamed up with the World Food Programme and other partners to craft a pilot program termed the Homegrown School Feeding and Health Program to address the needs of local farmers and provide nutritious meals for pupils while improving enrollment and retention in schools. 12 countries were initially identified for the pilots. They include Angola, Democratic Republic of Malawi, Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, Senegal, Uganda, and Zambia. Other countries include South Africa, Rwanda, and Botswana. Although NEPAD identified the homegrown school feeding program as having an impact on the food security in Africa, with the potential to contribute to long-term development goals. The National Homegrown School Feeding Program, as the Nigerian program is called, was a cascade of the Africa program and was piloted in 12 initial states in 2004. However, 10 years down the line, 2014, only 2 states continued implementation, and from lessons learned from those 2 states, the national program was redesigned to focus on social inclusion, effective multisectoral coordination, high-level political will, as well as linkages to local agriculture. The redesigned program was launched in 2015 as part of the country's social investment programs, and the aim was to provide a hot, nutritious meal to pupils in public primary schools. And by public primary schools, these were the target group of people who were the poorest of the poor or the most vulnerable in the society. The objectives include increased enrollment, which is focusing on reducing 30% of the number of out of 2 children in the country, to improve nutrition and health status, increasing local agricultural production and creating jobs across the value chain to increase family incomes. The program currently provides a hot midday meal to over 9 million primary school children in 34 states and the Federal Capital Territory. 56,000 schools, public primary schools are covered, and the meals are served by 105,000 cooks, 97% of whom are women. To achieve the objective of the nutrition and improving the nutrition and health status of school-age children, a technical expert committee was inaugurated to, among other tasks, review and recommend quantitative nutrient standards for the school meals. The committee decided to focus on the children aged 6 to 9 years, which were the current beneficiaries of the program in grades 1 to 3. And they conducted a desk review to identify the recommended nutrient intakes, averaging the contribution achieved by school meals in all of the countries that were reviewed. The committee agreed on the percentage RNI contribution to be provided by the school meals in Nigeria and decided on additional criteria for the meals, and from there developed a nutrient standards document, which was shared with 3 expert reviewers and revised based on the reviewers' comments. The nutrient standards document for the school feeding program being designed now was to provide both qualitative and quantitative guidelines. Energy and fat was to have 30% recommended RNI for children 6 to 9 years, while protein and 6 micronutrients, which are all of public health importance, was to provide 50% of the RNI. And then in terms of quality and the quantity, 4 out of the 7 food groups were targeted to be on the menu every time it is served. So the table shows how the RNI was achieved and the targets for the school feeding program. The RNI was according to the World Health Organization and the Food and Agricultural Organization and the FAO. The 7 food groups were according to the WHO Infant and Young Child Feeding Program, feeding guidelines, and the food contains grains, roots and tubers, legumes and nuts, dairy products, fleshy foods, eggs, vitamin E, and other fruits and vegetables. Having defined the standards, the state teams in every of the 34 states were trained to develop menu based on these standards using a school meal planner, which is a tool that enables users to create nutritionally balanced and market-costed school meals using daily nutritional allowances as recommended. The tool allows the teams to also look at the micro and macro content of the meals cooked with local ingredients. It's a tool available offline and online, and it calculates the amount which the meals meet. The amount the meals meet the recommended daily intake of the key nutrients as identified by the FAO and WHO and as recommended by the committee. For soybean, most locally made soya foods include cheese, tofu, soy flour, as presented by my colleagues who presented earlier, and referring to Peter's presentation. They are very cheap, inexpensive, and excellent source of protein, of certain minerals and vitamins. They are affordable, cost only 1/5 of the price of beef and poultry, and yet they carry twice as much protein as these animal products. One of the meals that we consume in this part of the world is cheese, soy tofu, which has been talked about. It's a white protein called precipitated from soy meal with salt or acid, rich in nutrients, both high quality protein and vitamin B. In Nigeria here, the cheese is made by using simple and manual kitchen equipment. But speaking about the value chain of the production of the cheese and providing it as a meal in the school feeding program, 6,370 cheese makers were employed in a state with 8 aggregators. These aggregators are farmers. They aggregate farm supplies from smallholder farmers to supply to the cheese makers. And it was calculated that 1.7 kilogram of soybean was required to make cheese for 100 pupils. Another one of the meals that is consumed on school feeding programs, homegrown school feeding programs, is the Tom Brown porridge. And Tom Brown now is a modified version of the CSP. It is served on school meals programs across Africa, but it started, the porridge started out as a winning diet for children under 5, but had been modified with 3 more grains and 2 legumes. The grains are millet, yellow corn, guinea corn, soybean, and groundnuts. it could have different grains as produced from that particular locality in which the Tom Brown was being consumed. But the soybean constituent was between 15% to 40% from different states consuming it in Nigeria. So it's a popular porridge that is being used as, and it is being served with a fruit, either watermelon or pineapple for the school children. The next is the texturized vegetable protein, or TSP. It's called the soy chunks, used in school meals, Ghana, South Africa, but not used in Nigeria. A 100-gram serving of soy chunks on the school feeding program is said to contain 48 grams of protein, 25.5 grams of carbohydrates, and about 336 calories. Currently, Nigeria is exploring possibilities of the use of this TVP in the school meals, engaging processors in the private sector. The last commonly developed soy milk produce is the soya milk. It's made by soaking soya beans and grinding them with water, and the fluid which results is strained as milk. Now, the plain milk is nutritive. You can add other nutrients to enhance it. It's an excellent source of high-quality protein, isoflavones, and B vitamins. This is also not on the school feeding program in Nigeria, though it is produced locally and consumed locally in the communities. The school feeding program is looking at exploring the possibilities of its inclusion with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture under the Dairy Development Program. Now, looking at Nigeria, we analyzed internally how much cheese, the Tom Brown, the daily intake of this is on the children. So for the one state in the country that consumes cheese, 17 grams of soya is required, and for 100 children. And if we're looking at 710,000, we're looking at a quantity of soybeans needed to be 1.2 metric tons, because it's served twice a week in that particular state. For other states that have Tom Brown, one of them have 15 grams of soybean in Tom Brown, the other has 40 grams. The total of the soybean intake within the country on the school feeding program as it is 20 metric tons, which is needed as the program is for 1 million children. But projecting forward, we look at how much 9 million children will need if we're providing 15 grams of soybean for them once a week on the menu. We're talking about 135 metric tons, and in the whole school year, 5,265. The domestic production in Nigeria is between 600,000 and 1 million tons, the second largest in Sub-Saharan Africa after South Africa and for Egypt. But we also found out that 41% of Nigeria's domestic production is consumed directly in rural areas as food, 53% as crushed or full-fat soy in animal diets, and 6% is used in industry. The school feeding program has not been factored in the 41% of the food consumption. And of course, this will cause the consumption to increase. The cost is between $350 to $519 per ton, and 1 ton has 900 kg bags. What we're talking about based on every discussion point today is that 100 grams of soya in country for us is costing 16,000 naira, which is a little over $30 to be spent. But we also found out that the cost of a meal per child is 19 cents per day, and meat, which is 15 grams of meat, is also close to 28 naira now in Nigeria. 15 gram of fish goes to 31 naira, and 15 gram of chicken goes for 33 naira. This is still very high based on what the diet consists of and the cost of the meal. But we have 15 gram of soybean for one child costing 24 naira, which is the cheapest source of protein that the children can have. Of course, studies are going on to look at the 15 gram, how much is food cost in terms of the RNI provided, and it provides 25% of RNI for the states that are being consumed, which is half of what the recommended RNI is giving, which is 50%. In conclusion, we see that there's an opportunity through the homegrown school feeding program across the Sub-Saharan Africa to add value to local production and enhance nutrition. But the utilization varies because of the different levels of production and the demand of the soybean produce. For Nigeria, plans are on the way to encourage the increased consumption of legumes, especially soybean, working with partners in Imperial College London. It's part of this effort is also looking at the technical research in which an evaluation of effective strategies can be used to increase the consumption of legumes on the program. Thank you so much for listening.
So great to talk. Thanks a lot. Bimbola, we have a few questions for you from the audience. The first question, how much of the processing was done in local kitchen or school kitchens?
For the cheese, all the processing was done in the school kitchens, while for the Thorn Brown, it was done by local processors.
Okay, thanks a lot. The other question, how did the local farmers connect processors for local school feeding?
Okay, thank you. Yes, the question is asking about how we have linked local farmers to the school feeding program. And the soybean is just an example. We organize the farmers into clusters. Here we call those clusters cooperative groups, where they are able to pool all their produce together. And under the Ministry of Agriculture, the produce is checked for and standardized, that it is fit to be supplied to the women or to the processors for the school feeding program. So the aggregators mentioned earlier in my presentation are the ones who are the go-between, who mop up all this produce, who carry out all the tests on it, and then move it to the processors or the cooks themselves to use for the program. And then the costing is done by the aggregators and the program implementers within the state, such that the women have the best buy of that product.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then I have a question. Provided that you will include, let's say, soya in your school program, do you think that you will have enough soybean production in Nigeria for covering your need?
But the production of soya now is between 600,000 tons, which is already being consumed. What we have seen on the school feeding program is that once there's a demand for a product, we have a lot more smallholder farmers and farmers going into production. And so the program is not scaled up initially, it is gradually scaled up from one state to the other. Looking at the demand we have now, we're looking at for 1 million children that are on the school feeding program, 1 million children require just 12 metric tons of the product, or 20 metric tons of the product. And so by the time the program announces that we need soya, just as we did for the egg production in country, the farmers know that once we go into production, the government will buy. So the possibility is there that we will have enough by the time we scale up the use of soya in country.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot then. And I would like to remind the audience that we are going now to have a panel discussion. So please post your questions, and we will have then a lively and nice discussion on this topic. Thanks again. So welcome back to this discussion or panel discussion. So I would like to go again into the discussion. We had it and the questions we had it over Dr. Goldsmith. There was a question which says, how would you embark a US small business to share the same goals with regards to the tremendous work you are doing in Africa in the soybean value chain development? Peter, would you like?
Yeah, if I understand the question, obviously we're a public sector institution, the Soybean Innovation Lab, funded by the US government, as well as other NGOs and local governments and so forth. But at the same time, this is a much bigger question and a good question. The soy value chain is inherently a commercial oriented value chain, very different from native staple crops and a lot of the traditional cropping interventions in Sub-Saharan Africa. So there are a lot of opportunities for private sector intervention. Most of our clients are private sector firms looking to bring in new technology, whether it be seed, fertilizer, processing knowledge, new food product development, how to deal with hexane in processing, floating feeds in aquaculture. So there are lots of private sector need there, private sector participants, because again, soy value chain is inherently commercial in nature. And so there are great opportunities, but I'd be more than happy to visit offline about specific points of entry, regional opportunities, technical opportunities, things like that.
So in fact, the person also complemented the question by saying that he's one of them ready to conduct work in Africa. So maybe the advice is to contact you directly. And maybe somebody else want also to comment on this question. For example, Liz, how to engage at the end to provide help for this program.
Yeah, I would second reaching out to Peter or myself. I'm happy to talk to this person as well. One of the things that I had mentioned in my presentation was the value of networking. And I think that, you know, it's so important to be able to have the relationships in country. And so working with folks like the Soybean Innovation Lab who potentially already have those relationships, with WISHH who potentially already has those relationships. We're happy to make introductions where they make sense, and you know, save people some significant time on doing their own research and trying to. We're happy to introduce people when we can. I think a lot comes from those personal connections, so we're happy to help make those.
Thanks a lot. We have another question. Much of the soybean in Africa is exported. Any chance of promoting a low-cost processing lines? This, Peter, was also for you.
Yeah, maybe just to be more specific, there are a lot of exports of soybean in Africa. I think that's what they're talking about, the domestic production, but that is inter and intra-regional trade. So it is very active because this is the supply, the poor supply-demand balance. Demand is far outstrips supply, so trade is quite active. So there's a lot of demand for the soybean that African farmers are producing. So soybean is moving actively within regions and across regions, and as would necessitate, there are significant imports into Sub-Saharan Africa to make up gaps as well, both from the Americas as well as from India.
I have a question. I don't know who can answer this. When we cultivate soybean in Africa, is there any particular issue from a cultivation perspective? So I don't know, yield, or this transfer, let's say, of cultivation is no problem? Yeah,
Fabiola, this is a very good question. This was asked essentially back in the early 2000s, when a lot of development organizations sought to bring soy to Africa and motivated USAID's initiation of a soybean innovation lab. What they had seen, the folks at USAID, was successful adoption and development of not only soybean production, but the soybean industrial cluster in tropical South America, not southern Brazil or Argentina, but low latitude Brazil in the state of Mato Grosso, Goiás, and Tocantins, Brazil. So they saw that soybean could develop quite well at low latitudes. That's what then motivated USAID to say, is then soy appropriate for Africa, and if so, how? And that's really what motivated the founding of the Soybean Innovation Lab. The short answer is yes, it's the same soybean. You can mix soybean from southern, eastern, western Africa. You can mix soybean from imported soybean with domestically produced soybean, but soybean has to be bred for its local environment. So there are varieties that perform better in West Africa at 2 degrees or 4 degrees north latitude, as opposed to 14 degrees south latitude, other varieties that may have been bred in Zimbabwe or Malawi. So the soybean, that's the beauty of soybean, is that it is quite fungible. You can mix soybean from the processing side Soybean can grow from 0 latitude up to 45 degrees north-south latitude.
Thanks a lot. Is there any question or other remark from the speakers, or I will look at the Google. Okay, we have a few questions. If you allow me. Is there enough soy in Africa for indispensable school feeding programs? I think this we have already partly addressed, but maybe somebody has also an answer for that. Maybe in another region than Nigeria.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I throw it to my colleagues as well. But as was pointed out, the demand for soy for human consumption is not very large. You can serve a lot of school lunches on very little soybean. I think it was 5 tons was, 5 tons was that, I think the earlier comment to provide the raw material for the Nigerian school lunch, and those ratios are very robust. It's not a strain on current supplies.
Yeah, just to add on to what Peter's saying, agreed 100%. I think the bigger issue, which he also brought up earlier in his previous answer, is what are you competing with? So soy is obviously not only being used for school meals programs and broader commercial food production, it's also being used in animal feed production. So while enough soy does exist on the continent for school meals, there's a significant portion of it going into animal feed production. And so, it's a balance of trying to figure out how to fill supply chain gaps where they exist, taking into account everything that soy is currently being used for and is expected to be used for in the next 5 to 10 years. All the projections that we have seen is that there's going to be a significant increase in demand for soy on the continent in the next 5 to 10 years, driven primarily by animal feed. So that's something that needs to be taken into account when you're considering is there or is there not enough soy on the continent for school meals programs.
Thank you.
And Fabiola, I just want to add that as Bimbola mentioned in her presentation, the missing link is agroprocessors, right? You can make it at a scale without the agroprocessors being part of the equation. And I think that's the way they're managing the problem in Nigeria. It makes complete sense. But again, there are some countries produce more or less soybeans, but as Liz and Pete have talked about, they're competing interests, right? And diverting the beans. But if there's a market, a school market, agroprocessors will jump at it. But they have to be deliberate. It has to be a policy. It has to be discussed on a level that it's a nutritious complement, not disregarding the other nutrients and the other foods that are available, right? But we have to talk we want to put all these potential solutions on the table and figure out what is actually the most cost-effective and the most nutritious way. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I think there is quite an interest from the audience also how to get involved and what is the first step that processors can take to get involved in school feeding in this area. I think we have partially already answered this question to get in touch, of course, with Peter, with Liz, but maybe from Bimbola or from other speakers, is there something else that you would like to add in that? How to get involved?
Well, I would like to talk about the role of agroprocessors and how we have packaged the school feeding program to be able to meet nutritional needs of these children. And so one of the areas we're focusing on is nutrition. Malnutrition in Nigeria is very high. We have 37% of the children under 5 stunted. And that is one area the government has focused on to say, how do we reduce this? Though they are not in the school feeding market, the school feeding space, the effects of the school feeding also trickle down to the household, because on the school feeding program, children learn healthy eating habits. They have food behaviors change that they take back to the households. For agro-processors, one of the things that can be done is to help develop local processing. We have found out that there's a gap between the industries and the school feeding program. So what we have is local processors who come to the communities, help build capacities of women who are cooks, who are farmers, to be able to enhance the production of soy products, which they have already been doing at the household level. The moment they enhance the women within the household level to produce the soy milk, to produce the soy cheese, or the tofu, which is the meat, they themselves are empowered to get more from the farmers and to sell more, either to the industries who use it for animal diets or for other activities. So the agro-processors have been able to find a niche in that space using this demand from the school feeding market. And I believe that can work everywhere else.
Thank you very much. Some addition on this, what Bimbola said just? Then I have a question on nutrition. I mean, here we are talking a lot about proteins. Maybe Bimbola, you can comment on that. What about the quality of fat? You have a target of quantity of fat, but do you have also recommendation on quality of fat? Your microphone.
Sorry for that, I was already talking. We have the quality of fat, regardless of the quality of fat, what the expert committee had recommended was that the fat should not be more than 30%, should not provide more than 30% of the energy for the children. We also factored in that the fat, the energy requirements of this group of children who are mostly in the rural areas, who mostly go out to do other activities after school, even before school, is high. But what we pegged it at was that the fat content of the meal should not provide more than 30% of energy, regardless of where it is from. So that is what is being used now.
Okay, and regarding, for example, the fatty acid composition, more unsaturated fat, do you have any recommendation, or there is no problem because the sources of fat that you use today, they are already, highly unsaturated and so on?
The saturation and unsaturation was not considered, firstly because the issue we have here is malnutrition, not obesity or overweight. And so we're trying to balance the targets. How do we ensure that the children don't go across board? How do we ensure that they come to optimal nutrition? So regardless of the saturated or unsaturated, we also considered the locality of the school meals, which is mostly in rural areas. They don't have access to this saturated fats that affect the growth and the health of the children. So that is one of the things that influence the decisions made by the committee.
Okay. Thanks.
And Fabiola, just to remind you also that there are, I guess, these programs should report on all the nutrients they're providing to children, regardless if it's fat, proteins, or carbohydrates. I have to look at all micronutrients. And what I mentioned before is that it seems to me it's easier to provide micronutrients just because of the amount that you're putting into the meal could be sneak in rather easily. So you can address micronutrient gaps better, or probably more effectively, because of it's not as bulky agent, such as, for example, a protein that might start changing the texture, the color, the flavor of the product. But when I was looking at these cases and was looking at all these other in different countries, it was very clear that though there are food composition databases available, we were just looking at the very top of the macronutrients. And there is, I think right now with the current knowledge and the availability of laboratories, hopefully in these countries as well, you can get your products tested. But the reality is that some of these laboratories, they're limited capacity, and some of the industries also are limited in the ability to do their own quality control. And for the most part, there's a lot of more attention has been given to safety, because safety is also a big, probably more important than nutrition at this point, to bring a very safe meal to these children that also are more vulnerable to, because they bring potentially issues, illnesses from home. So I think that when we talk about how to balance nutrition and how to provide this information to the programs, I think I agree with you. We have to add all this information, and that's where technical capacity has to be improved. That's why the connections with the processors have to happen. That's why the communication with governments and laboratories and quality assurance laboratories and FDA type organizations, institutions in the governments also become important. So, I mean, everybody looks at school lunch programs as great platforms to do, to bring strategies. But one of the things that is very peculiar, and probably Bimbola can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people want to touch the program, right? Because there's funding coming to it. And then there's this conversation on how to fund it, but you have many organizations, many dependencies that actually want to be part of that program as well. So there's competition for interest too, right? So, but I think at the very basic, we should have at least understood how much of these micronutrients we're delivering if you have a good menu and if you have a good composition database.
Thank you. So, any other remark? So, at the end, this is a question for all of you. I don't know who wanted to take it. If you have to express one, let's say, action that is really key and that should be really solved, the problem that should be really solved, what would it be for you? I don't know who wants first to answer this question. You want to start, Peter?
Yeah, I think for us, I think we've in the research, the literature, the technical work, networks, and so forth with respect to school lunch feeding are pretty well known on how to fortify, especially our area in protein fortification. I think the real lift and need in terms of improving, and there's just so much potential using school lunch as a mechanism for improving outcomes for children, both nutritional, learning outcomes, gender targets related goals as well through the school lunch system. But there's still a policy bottleneck that is, I mean, the Soybean Innovation Lab, just on a personal note, we're not policy folks. So I think those that are policy folks, I think that's where the work needs to be done on how, because as Bimbola pointed out, as well as Dr. Andrade and Liz too, all three were talking about processors and the technology to produce the foods is there. But there seems to be a bottleneck with respect to policy and having school lunch programs focus on nutritional and economically efficient outcomes. I'd love to learn more about it. And certainly the Soybean Innovation Lab would love to be supportive of that conversation. But that's where I would see the work to be done.
Thank you. Lisa, you wanted to comment on that?
Sure, couldn't agree more. I think that, and to be clear, this is an issue that we also face in the US, and I'm sure in many other countries as well. Policy, I think, is the key. One thing I will add at this that Peter touched on at the very end, I think, is the economics as well, which can also be impacted through policy. But I think that there has to be a way for the food processing companies, they have to be able to produce the products at a profit. Because I think, everyone is in agreement, just like Peter said, that school meals are extremely valuable, and there can be significant strides in nutrition. And just like Bimbola said, in the household level as well, through school meals programs. But the things that are missing are the policies in place to ensure that the nutrition levels are there, but also to ensure that a profit can be made delivering the products at the nutritional level that is needed. And so I think those are the two things that I would focus on.
Thank you. Juan, what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I agree with the colleagues here. I think there's development that can happen bottom up and or top down. It seems that most countries are receptive to top down when it comes to policies, but you need to have a product that is technically feasible. And I think we have argued, hopefully eloquently enough, that is not a problem when it comes to soybeans or reducing the cost or maximizing the flavor. Because I saw those cheese balls that Bimbola was talking about. They look good, right? And you can argue they're deep fried and you can have some oil there too, right? And the other conversation is that this is just one component. And we don't want to bring this idea to the audience that we are trying to discourage these other ingredients that are important for nutrition that animal source foods, for example, have to bring. But I think this silo of what is the most nutritious food and that can be brought into the school lunch program, and that's better than the other, we have to get away from that. We have to just move away from that kind of conversation. It doesn't help. And I think we need nutritionists, don't think about foods, think about nutrients. And that's what we need every day, nutrients. But sadly, we don't buy nutrients, we buy foods and we eat foods. And that to me is the conversation that we need to, honest conversation need to have, is that we can mix many different foods and have a very good balanced meal. But it's very hard to do that at a cost when you're talking about limited resources in Sub-Saharan Africa for a school lunch program. And that is something that I think at the higher spheres of conversation and policy, that's something that's what we create in the data. That's our job as Soybean Innovation Lab. Hey, it's technically feasible. Hey, it's economically feasible. Hey, we have the ability to do this. What's missing? Well, we need more political will. Maybe we need more policy will. And it's something that I'm happy to have this conversation, as Pete mentioned, because I think we can make a good argument that this could work. And not just for Nigeria, other cases too. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. And Bimbola, maybe it's your turn. You, from your great experience on the field, maybe you can comment. I mean, what you really see as important step forward, important action that should be put in place.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll pick from everyone because on the field, a bit of research, policy backs up research, cost is also inclusive. The value chain itself is viable. The soybean value chain is viable, and in terms of the cost, it's cost effective in the long run because the school feeding market allows increase in production, allows increase in income for farmers, and a lot of other things. So even when the policy is in place, my question that bothers us on the field is how does this translate to individual households? How does this translate to increased use at the household level? The school feeding program is one program, but there are other opportunities that could leverage on that school feeding program to provide soybean for nutritious use, both for children and for households. And so I would want to see how research is translated to practice in the terms of we have this product, how can we bring it down to allow a lot of players utilize the product for providing nutritious meals. It's something we have seen work, and we want to scale that up to say we have something like the texturized soy protein, which is not common here, and it is something that we can use on the feeding program and also export back into the households. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So anybody wanted to make some closing, let's say, remarks? And or touch some points that was not discussed? An important, let's say, message also would like to give to our audience?
I just want to say thank you, Fabiola, for moderating, and to the AOCS and all the team, Amy, for helping us bring this information to the public. And let's remember that this information will have a home in the on a website, so more people can actually access it, which is it's something that the benefits of virtual, right, deliveries. And hopefully get to meet Liz and Bimbola sometime soon, and as well you, Fabiola, during this probably next year after we have a vaccine. But we'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if we don't have any other further remarks, there are no questions also in our team room. So I would like to close this event here. I think that for me, the closing remark, I mean, first of all, it was very, very interesting, this discussion, very open discussion. I think we can take home this message that definitively soybean is a great opportunity. It's giving a nutrition at affordable cost. We also discussed that the taste of the product that can be developed is good. And also I liked a lot what Bimbola said, that there are other opportunities beyond that. So we need also more research. So I think that there is a lot to be done. I'm very happy, and thanks a lot for involving me also in this discussion. I've learned a lot. And so I would like also to thank also all the speakers that they have been here and they have presented excellent topics. And I also would like to thank all the audience that has been with us. So thank you very much. Thanks to all the AOCS also organization that has done a fantastic job. Amy, fantastic, and all the others. Thank you very much, and see you around, and stay safe. Bye-bye.